Good morning. Oh, please be seated. Thanks so much. A lot of tea times canceled this morning with the not so good weather at the Villages, but it's always good to be back. We opted out a winter this past weekend compared to the rest of the country, but I got bad news. We've opted back in for the coming week, so it's going to get a little chilly throughout the state of Florida relative to what we're used to, but we'll certainly get through that. I'm happy to be joined here today by, got a great cast. We got our First Lady, my wife Casey, who's done an amazing job. Dr. Joseph Ladapo, Florida Surgeon General, is here. And then we have your representative, Ryan Chamberlain. He's doing a really good job for you guys. Thank you. So before I get into some of this, and I'll let the First Lady and Joe handle most of that, I think it's important to point out when the election of 2024 happened, one of the things that I did was convene a special session of the Florida legislature because I knew that it was very important that all state and local law enforcement would cooperate with DHS with respect to enforcing immigration laws. We had 4 years of an open border. 5, 7, 10 million people coming across illegally, probably 10, but certainly many, many millions. And that was a dereliction of duty by the President Biden at the time. And there obviously was a demand to stop that, but also to repatriate folks that had come illegally. And so we did that. We said we want to have a requirement that there's cooperation. Because that's really, really important. We had to fight to get that, but we eventually got it. And so what's ended up happening is, just Florida in the last, 8, 9 months, 10 months since we've been doing this, we've helped between state and local, we've gotten almost 20,000 illegal alien apprehensions, and that's over and above what DHS would be doing, on their own. But people are working together because we understand, we have responsibility to ensure, that the laws are enforced. What we're not doing, is what you have people like Waltz and this mayor doing, which is basically trying to sabotage the enforcement operations. They're creating a toxic environment where they're really inciting people, to go out and show hostility to the agents who are doing this. That is not a recipe for success. That is not the way that you do business. And so we're going to continue with positive cooperation. It's certainly made a difference here in Florida. I mean, we've got a lot of folks now that have been removed from our communities, and that makes the community safer. It obviously helps taxpayers going forward. But that cooperation, I think, has been really, really important. And you can't have a situation where you have an administration come in, they open the border illegally, you have all these people, and then someone gets elected to fix it, and you basically have a right to sabotage, and then you can't do so. What? The law didn't matter for all those years, and there's no way to correct. We obviously know that we need to do that. So we're going to continue with our positive cooperation. I think that's the only way to do it, and I think that's it's paid big time dividends, for the state of Florida. Now, the other thing that we've done is, if you have somebody illegally driving on the roads and they don't have a license, our highway patrol will find that and then turn them over to DHS. Obviously, you do that. You have a criminal alien, leaves prison, we'll tell DHS, they come pick them up, and then they send them home to their country. You got to do that. Enforcement matters, but you also can help solve this problem by removing incentives to come and stay illegally. So we've done things like employment verification in Florida, E-Verify. We had, before I was governor, they had enacted in Florida in-state tuition for illegal aliens. I was able to sign the repeal of that provision because it honestly treated somebody, illegal alien, better than U.S. citizens in Georgia and North Carolina, and that didn't make any sense, but obviously that was an enticement. We've said no driver's licenses or ID cards, all the different things. Of course, got to be a citizen to vote, and people have been prosecuted for voting as illegal aliens, but there's definitely things that can be done. I mean, I think the federal government should deal with these remittances that illegal workers are sending back home. If you stop that, that's going to be a huge disincentive for people to come and remain illegally. Congress can defund sanctuary cities. Like, these are cities that are being empowered. The Republicans in the House, they just voted to continue funding sanctuary cities. Like, why would you do that? Defund that. So using the tools that you have to create, I think, an environment that's going to promote, the rule of law is really, really important. Interior enforcement is part of that, for sure. And no state's done more than Florida to assist that, and we'll continue to do it. But there's other things that I think are important. We banned sanctuary cities in Florida my first year as governor. I mean, why would we want sanctuary jurisdictions to be able to do that? So they should do that nationwide, and I think that would make, a really, really big difference. But we've had positive results. We've had positive interactions. I think it's a very hostile situation that's been created, and that's not the way to do business, and that's not what we want to see. I think people want to see orderly society. They want to see the rules enforced. They want to see people working together, and that's what you're seeing in the free state of Florida. Now, we're here to talk about Florida's Healthy First initiative. So a few months ago, the First Lady, Dr. Ladapo, Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins, and I launched our, Make America Healthy Again Florida initiative. And we said there was going to be a lot of different things that we were going to do. One of the things that they've done now over the last several months is they've done testing on key things that families use, particularly with respect to children. So a few weeks back, we did an announcement on testing of baby formula that Dr. Ladapo had overseen at the Department of Health. And, you had some of these baby formulas, they've got things like lead and things in them in levels that are probably not good for human consumption. And so they were able to do those test results, put out the results on the web page, and then let people. There were some formulas that were very positive, but then there were others that would be questionable. And so that's really important to be able to show folks what's going on. So we really view us as the state as serving an important role. I think a lot of what we're doing is consistent with what they're trying to do, right now at the federal level, but we're showing we have a role to be able to do some of these things that maybe the FDA has not yet done, maybe they will do in the future, but to give parents information, particularly when it comes to things with very, very small children. And so that was really, people really appreciated that. People have been able to make decisions as a result of that. And so then the next thing they're doing, as you can see, is candy. And looking at candy, and I said, listen, let the results, come as they are, but please don't tell me there's anything wrong with Reese's cups or whatever. And sure enough, there's not. So I'm good. Like, I just, it's, and I know my kids would be very upset if there was something wrong with Reese's cups. So they went and they tested, some of the candy. And seeing some of the things that are in this, and I think some of it is like you take one piece of candy with maybe some of this, but if you do certain quantities, which are kids just eating like 10 nerds? No, they're eating the whole box of nerds, right? Well, at least my kids are, and then they don't behave afterwards because of the sugar rush, and so I need to stop giving that to them. I know my wife is telling me not to give it to them. So you have this, and it's like, okay, well, what quantities, all this other stuff. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on that, but it's going to be the same type of thing. They're going to the results will be made public today, so you'll be able to look at that. You'll be able to see. And look, we just want parents kind of to know what's out there. I mean, there's a lot that goes on. It's like you're in a supermarket, you grab this, grab that. Maybe not everything is created equal in terms of what would be the healthiest options. And it's not even a situation where we're saying like, oh, you can only eat perfectly healthy stuff. I mean, like, if there's choices between different types of candies that you're giving a treat for, and one has the better ingredients, and another may have some stuff in there that you wouldn't want, well, wouldn't you want to know that as a parent or a grandparent before you're making some of these decisions? And so, thanks for First Lady and for Joe for spearheading this. I think it's really, really important, and I know people will really appreciate hearing the results. And so, to tell you about it, we'll bring up the First Lady.
You can imagine we have some really fun conversations at home about all of this I was like, yes, the Reese's peanut butter cups we found were good, so no worries. But as a mom, you know, I was doing this morning what I think a lot of moms and parents all across the state and frankly the United States of America, they were doing. A little chaotic in our household, getting everybody dressed and out the door, but, you know, I was making sure that I was packing lunches for them. And, you know, that's what parents do primarily in the morning. One of the big things they do to help prepare their kids to be able to have a productive and they hope healthy day. And so, you know, I'm putting these foods into their lunch boxes and, you know, I'm choosing things that, of course, that are affordable, but also that I have some assumption that they are safe. Because these decisions are made off of trust. Trust that what is sold on store shelves is what it claims to be. Trust that these ingredients on these labels are indeed accurate. And trust that foods marketed to children are not quietly exposing them to harmful chemicals. You know, there's a reasonable expectation that our food supply, especially foods marketed to children, should not contain toxic chemicals. Ensuring the integrity of our food supply has been one of the central missions of this commission that the governor put forth. That's why when we launched this Healthy Florida First initiative, it was designed to really bring transparency, independent testing, and accountability to the foods that Floridians and, frankly, Americans are consuming sometimes every day. So under this initiative, as the governor has mentioned, we started with baby formula because there is no more vulnerable population than, of course, the babies and the youngest among us. The Florida Department of Health, we tested 24 different baby formulas, and then what they found was very troubling. They found that in 16 of the 24, they contained elevated levels of arsenic, cadmium, mercury, and lead. And for many infants, formula is their sole source of nutrition during the critical stages of development. And this, of course, for us and for many parents and grandparents, this is unacceptable. And we made it clear that this testing, and we're continuing to work on that with the baby formula, but that is not where we're going to stop. We said we're going to continue to do the testing. And so next, as promised, the attention has turned to another category heavily consumed by children, and that is candy. Through independent testing conducted by certified laboratories, the Florida Department of Health tested 46 different candy brands from 10 different companies. Of those, 33 were traditional, well-known candies, brands that we grew up with, things like Three Musketeers and Snickers and Skittles and Nerds and Kit Kats and Jolly Ranchers. In 26 of the 33 traditional candy brands tested, arsenic was detected at elevated levels. These levels are problematic when evaluated over the course of a year, and this is where the distinction is so crucially important. The concern here is not necessarily about one single piece of candy on one single day. The concern is when these products are consumed, as they realistically are, repeatedly over time, exposure can exceed what the Department of Health has determined to be safe annual allotment for arsenic. And here's why the context really matters. Take Nerds, for example. Yes, my daughter really likes Nerds. According to the department's analysis, consuming more than 96 Nerds, the small granular pieces of Nerds in a year, exceeds what is considered a safe annual arsenic exposure for children. But 96 Nerds, as we well know, is not typically what comes in a box. When you think about it, a typical smaller box can contain about 2,000. If you get one of those big boxes that you get like a movie theater, that's about 8,000 Nerds. Asking families to stop at 96 pieces over a year is not realistic when it's viewed against how the product is packaged, marketed, and then consumed. Another example to give you context and perspective is Swedish fish. The Department of Health determined that more than 8 pieces of Swedish fish exceed the estimated safe annual arsenic exposure level for a child. Yet in a typical small bag, usually 3 to 5 ounces, there are anywhere from 50 to 100 pieces. Stopping at 8 pieces does not reflect the real-world consumption. The same with Jolly Ranchers. The hard candies also kids love. The department's analysis shows that more than 6 pieces can exceed the annual safe threshold for arsenic exposure. A standard 7-ounce bag typically contains anywhere from 25, 30, 40 individually wrapped candies. And on it goes through 26 different types of candies who tested for those elevated levels that, again, are problematic when you think about them in aggregate. And keep this in mind, too. This is really before taking into consideration aggregate exposure, yes, as you're eating more than the allotment that the Florida Department of Health has deemed in a single serving or in a partial part of the bag. It's also consumed over time, more than a year, the candies, but it's also looking as you're eating more candy and then other foods that could potentially contain arsenic as well. Parents and grandparents may not be aware of these potential problems about arsenic. And cumulative exposure is not something that anyone sees reflected on a label or at a checkout aisle. And the context matters, especially for the health and the well-being of our children. And as the Surgeon General will talk about in a second, arsenic is a known toxic element. Long-term exposure, particularly during childhood, has been linked to developmental impacts, effects on the immune system, and increased cancer risk later in life. Children are uniquely susceptible because they consume more food relative to their body weight and often have a less varied diet, and their developing organs are less able to metabolize and excrete the toxic substances. So that is concerning. But I do want to say that there is some good news, and it matters because context and perspective does matter with all of this. The candies did not generally show elevated levels of lead, mercury, cadmium, and other problematic carcinogens, and not all candy tested showed elevated levels of arsenic. Some traditional candies came back with no identified significant arsenic risk, like Hershey chocolate bar, Reese's peanut butter cups, Whoppers, M&Ms, Twix, and Milky Way. That tells us something really important, that this contamination is not inevitable. It can be prevented, and we can ultimately do better as a society. The same is true for products marketed as healthier or organic. Of the 13 candies advertised as organic or healthier alternatives, only 2 showed elevated levels of arsenic. Those were Smart Sweet Caramels and Smart Sweets Sweet Fish. The rest did not, which enforces that better sourcing, better manufacturing practices really can, in the long run, make a huge difference. And this is about facts, this is about truth, it's about transparency, and ultimately it is about empowering consumers, grandparents, and parents. Floridians and frankly all Americans deserve to make informed decisions about what they feed their families and have confidence in those ingredients that they're safe, and then have the trust that they are not corrupted by harmful chemicals. Our goal really has been, as the governor has articulated, to support the federal MAHA movement by working as force multipliers to be able to drive accountability through testing. The FDA primarily works as a reactionary force, stepping in after problems are identified. And while that role is very important, Florida is really working to change the system by supporting the FDA to not only continue to get in front of these problems by testing, but also by leading a coalition of states to trust but verify the integrity of our food supply. There is an expectation put on food manufacturers, and we are working to make sure that that expectation is met. And this is really bigger than just testing or candy. You know, I was thinking about this, that in Florida, we have invested over $1 billion in cancer care and research. We have directed tens of millions of dollars towards pediatric care. The other day, the governor and I were in Jacksonville, Florida, where the Mayo Clinic there unveiled the first carbon ion treatment therapy. It's the only one in the entire Western Hemisphere, and it is here in the state of Florida. And we've also looked into innovative research like ivermectin and its potential to try to combat cancer. Those investments really matter, but prevention matters too. Reducing unnecessary exposure to arsenic and lead and cadmium and mercury and other harmful contaminants in the food supply, especially for our children, gives us a better chance of potentially warding off long-term health ramifications. We should be looking at prevention just as much as we are looking at treatment. So the takeaway, I think, is very simple. There should be a reasonable expectation that chemicals do not quietly make their way into our food supply. Consumers deserve transparency. Parents deserve information to be able to make informed decisions about their health and their children's health or their grandchildren's health. And companies should be held to standards that we know from the evidence are achievable. Healthy Florida First is about prevention, accountability, and trust. And honestly, we are just getting started with all of this. So if there is a question, we have put all of this out on the website on exposingfoodtoxins.com. We are just getting started, and I think we are doing some really historic things in the free state of Florida, and I'm just honored to be a part of it.
Thank you, Joe.
Good morning. Hello to our friends at the Villages. Well, we are, we've been doing this. I feel like we were just here, and I guess it was like a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, that we made the announcement about the baby formula testing. And now we're doing candy. And I know some people had palpitations out there, because we have our relationships with our candies. But it's funny, I have one more thing in common with the governor, because I love, and I don't really eat them anymore, but I love Reese's Cups. And those did come out as being better than some of the other candies in terms of some of these heavy metals. So that, I know some people are going to be breathing a sigh of relief in the audience, because those are good. Chocolate and peanut butter, very special divine combination there, right? So, I agree with the First Lady. I think this is really important work that we're doing. And it's very analogous to what Governor DeSantis has led for the years that he's been governor and during his term, which is like transparency and power to the people. For decades, and in fact centuries, we've seen power shift to private interests that are working in collusion with government, and not to the betterment of the people, really to sort of private benefit of individuals who are engaged in making these arrangements, or the government officials who aid them and abet them. And that's literally a summary of where we are as a society now. And certainly a lot of people, so many people became more aware of that, including myself, during the COVID-19 pandemic. And, we saw the power of, we saw the efforts to basically disempower people, right? Like, do this, do that, 6 feet away, wear 3 masks. You have to take this vaccine, it'll fix everything. Now you have to take a second one, now a third one, now a fourth one. And we saw the shift in individuals trying to, both becoming more powerful by receiving more information and knowledge, usually from a grassroots perspective, right? It wasn't, that information wasn't coming from the government, but also, people working to help other people become more empowered. And finally, we were able to shift the tide. And that same paradigm, that same framework, that's exactly what's here. Is it shocking that, we have so many different types of food that have carcinogens, like known human carcinogens in them at high levels? It is shocking. And yet, that's what's normal currently. And, I'm really grateful to the governor to, provide us support to do this, and to the First Lady to have the vision to say, you know what? It is possible for us. Let's put everything into this, and let's change the tide. Let's make this normal become abnormal. And so that's what we're doing. And we have, as she said, we have a lot more to go. There's a lot more to go. There's plenty of dirt, unfortunately, to uncover. So in this case, with candy, the major thing that I found striking is that, arsenic is in soil. It's naturally occurring. It's everywhere. It's actually in all foods. However, it tends to be in low concentrations. And sometimes it can be in higher concentrations, particularly if food comes from, say, apple orchards, for example, that were historically treated, say, back in the early 1900s with a particular type of pesticide that was high in arsenic. So sometimes some foods are sort of more problematic than others for very good reasons. But in general, it's low in most foods. Rice tends to have higher amounts. I was really shocked by the levels of arsenic in common candies. the levels of arsenic in common candies are much higher, 2, 3, 4 times higher than even foods that we know have high levels of arsenic in general, like rice. And compared to foods that just typical foods that people eat, the levels of arsenic were 20, 30, 40 times higher. Just unbelievable. And candy, that I ate as a kid, and I'm sure many of you ate as children, and Halloween, and just you're scarfing down on that stuff. So they're very high. And these charts that show how much candy people can consume before they exceed annual limits, what those charts are showing are the fact that arsenic is actually highly carcinogenic. So it doesn't take much of it to start causing a problem in terms of increasing the risk of cancer. And it's shocking to imagine, but it takes very little arsenic consumed on a regular basis to increase your likelihood of cancer. So just to put this into additional context, the types of cancers that have been linked to arsenic exposure and consumption include cancer of the lungs, cancer of the liver, cancer of the kidneys, cancer of the skin that's non-melanoma, and then there are other types of organ dysfunction. The First Lady mentioned some immune dysfunction, other types of dysfunction. Arsenic is just, it's very bad. So we're going to be sharing the information that we received from the testing. That's going to be all publicly available. The way you come up with these estimates are based on models about the relationship between exposure and risk. Depending on the inputs, depending on the assumptions that go into the models, you get different estimates. What we have here are highly conservative. So we've used for the purpose of this, the strictest levels, the strictest inputs, the strictest standards. So that's how we've come up with this. If you use different standards, maybe instead of 6 Jolly Ranchers, maybe you can have a bag in a year. And maybe, I don't know, maybe you can consume a whole box of Nerds. But either way, I mean, the picture doesn't change. I mean, clearly this stuff is high in arsenic. And as a parent, you probably want to avoid doing that to your kids, like if you have control over it, if you have a choice. Also, as the First Lady said, it's not always the case that the organic or the healthier versions are actually better for you. But in this particular case, when it comes to the metals, to the toxic metals, they actually do seem to be better for you. So, like, some people buy Unreal, and Unreal, I happen to know, makes peanut butter, chocolate, Reese's like candy. So that tended to test really good. There's some other brands, I think like one has like Goodies or Goodness or something like that, but that tended to test pretty good. But these other brands that are similar to the brands that most of us grew up eating at Halloween, but they do tend to be less toxic. So that's good news. So we have more work to do. As the First Lady said, we're going to keep pushing on this front hard because people deserve it, and we should not have ended up in this place in the first place where folks are consuming stuff and have no idea the types of risks that they're taking on when they're consuming it. And we're going to keep working in this area, and it's important because we deserve it. I mean, people deserve it, and our families deserve it. Our kids deserve better health. So thanks.
Well, thanks, Joe, and thanks to the First Lady for that. And I know there's more things that they're testing, so there'll be more information coming very soon. I also just wanted to point out, so Friday we got state GDP numbers, the size of the economy. And when I became governor, Florida's economy was a little over $1 trillion. Friday's numbers were at $1.85 trillion, and so it's like a 70% increase in 7 years. We have the second, as a percentage basis, we're number 2 in America behind Idaho. We just up to Idaho, helping them with the passing a balanced budget amendment through the states, which we're trying to do. We got 28. We need 34, but and I think they're going to do it. But I used to rattle off Florida. We're number one in economic freedom, number one economy. 3 years I do my thing, and I'd be like number one in GDP economic growth. And then someone said, "No, you're not. You're number two." And I was like, "Well, I was like, no, we're ahead of Texas. I know. Trust me. I look at that. No, Idaho." And so Idaho's one as a percentage, not obviously that. So that's that. So that's where we'd be like, I think, top 15 in the world if we were our own country. For economy, which is really, really good. And then since I've been governor, if you take all the debt the state has accumulated, we've retired 50% of that just in my term because we're doing accelerated debt repayment. The legislature has funded a program that you buy the bonds cheaper. Retire them early, and then you don't have to pay the interest. You save on principal too, and so we've saved probably between principal and interest. We probably saved $1 billion, $2 billion over the last few years by doing that early. So if you said the taxpayer-supported debt of Floridians, if you had to write a check for your share, I think it's like $400. If you had to write a check for your share of the federal debt, I think it's like $110,000, $130,000. Some people even say a lot more than that, but bottom line, it's a lot. So and obviously federal has gone up, every year for how many years? We're going down every year. They used to have that debt clock in New York City showing the national debt going up every day. I want to create one for Florida where the clock shows it going down every day. I mean, wouldn't that be something that would be neat? And the other thing that we're doing is 2026 is America 250. And so we've really leaned into this, I think, more than any other state by far, because I think it's important, one, that we commemorate that. Two, that we remind people about, what it means to have founded the United States of America. What about the ideals that it was founded on? How did we have a constitution that came out of that the next decade? All these, and especially for young people, we've really increased civics in the schools. So now you have very robust. We have programs for teachers where they can learn about all the building blocks of the American Republic throughout Western civilization, things they don't really teach as much in colleges. They do it now in Florida's universities, but not as much around the country because it's considered a lost art. It's not kosher with their ideological agenda. And so there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but that's really fallen out of favor. Well, you need to know all this. So we put them through a course. It's voluntary, but they get $3,000 bonus if they go through the course. And it's like 50 hours of like really, really good stuff. And then we now do really reinvigorated speech and debate. We had very little speech and debate 7 years ago. Now every single school district has speech and debate, and we have hundreds of people that are going to be in the championship in the spring down at New College in Sarasota. And what we've done is we now give the winner, we've endowed a $50,000 scholarship to the winner, $25,000 for second place, $15,000 for semifinalists, $10,000 for quarterfinalists. And I think we now have that funded. I mean, it's not taxpayer, it's the direct support organization, the foundation for the Department of Education, but they've gotten enough support to where, that's probably funded for the next 10 years, even if they have no additional donations. And so I think that that's really important that they're doing it. So we've been doing that, but then 250, our view is like, yeah, let's lean in. So we have counties that are named after different founding fathers. And so, I'm like, okay. So we brought a Jefferson statue to Jefferson County and put him in front of the courthouse. I got a Washington statue in the state capitol that we got from Mount Vernon. Beautiful statue that we've been displaying there. We're getting a replica built. We're going to put that in Washington County. I got Ben Franklin in Franklin County. The thing is like these blue states are taking these statues down, so I get them at a discount on the open market. I mean, it's really fun. So we've got James Madison coming in for Madison County. We've got Hamilton for Hamilton, James Monroe down in the Keys, Monroe County, and all that. And we're going to do that. But what we're also doing is we are going to be doing things to also commemorate folks who've really represented those founding ideals, throughout, American history. And so we're going to be doing soon a Ronald Reagan statue at Florida International University. The president's house is named the Reagan House, so we're going to do something down there. I've got a lot of other folks in the hopper, but I got to bring someone to the villages, and so I got to figure out who we bring to the villages. I could do Abraham Lincoln, I could do Eisenhower. This is an Eisenhower thing. So we got to figure out, what the connections. Some of these have connections to Florida. I'm doing Calvin Coolidge. I'm doing it. We're going to do it in Polk County because that was his last public appearance as president, and back in 1929. I think we're going to do Frederick Douglass at St. Augustine. He was down there, campaigning for civil rights after the Civil War in St. Augustine. So we're going to do that. We're going to do others. But I got to figure out who we want in the villages. So you guys talk to your folks. Let us know who we can do. We want to do someone that I think that people will be proud of and whatnot. I don't know that Eisenhower was ever here, though there's a lot of fanfare, and I think it's been very well done, everything that they've done here on that. He may have been in other parts of Florida during his tenure in the Army, and then he would go to the Keys. But that was Truman at that. We have a little White House down there that we do for Truman that he used to stay, and we've put money in to refurbish it. So I don't know that I could do Eisenhower down there. That'd probably have to be Truman, but maybe Eisenhower, maybe Lincoln, maybe some other folks. And so you guys let us know, and we'll make it happen. We've got to run. I got to get back to there. We're running a little late this morning. I wish I could stay longer, but God bless the villages and